The Beaumonts believed they were cunning, sending me, Margot, the widow, the outcast, to satisfy a blood pact with the werewolf alpha of Château Noir. Not the elegant heiress, not the cherished daughter, they thrust me forward in tattered linens, a pawn in their fear and ambition. The storm lashed the wagon, the wind shrieking like the beast I was meant to meet, yet the true terror came from within, my kin's cruel satisfaction, their laughter buried beneath the roar of rain. Years passed, my husband died on the morning after our wedding, leaving whispers of a curse trailing me like shadowed wings. Now, I was offered as tribute, a sacrificial bride to the sovereign of darkness who had hunted his prize through centuries. My heart pounded as the gates of Château Noir loomed, blackened and merciless. Behind me, Vivian and Celeste's faces were masks of triumph, my suffering their shield. Alone, drenched, abandoned, I stepped into the unknown. Every muscle screamed in fear, every thought conjured the tales of blood and fury awaiting me. Yet in their betrayal lay a hidden twist. In casting me aside, the Beaumonts had delivered the one woman the Alpha had desired across lifetimes. The hunt had only just begun. 1823, Provence Hills. Margot is left in the rain at Château Noir's gates. The werewolf Lord Lucien emerges, sensing her as his fated mate rather than an insult. The chateau loomed as a bastion of jagged granite, its turrets piercing the tempest like daggers defiant of heaven. Grotesques leered from ledges, akin to predators eyeing quarry. A bolt illuminated the colossal walnut portals. Margot neared, her palm ascending to the brass striker fashioned as a stag's antler. I am naught but a shade, she pondered. This merely the rite. She rapped. 1, 2, 3. The resonance reverberated not solely through the edifice but the sod beneath her soles. For an interminable span, hush reigned. Then, languidly, the vast portals creaked ajar, unveiling a vaulted foyer aglow with hovering tapers. Centered stood no retainer, but a figure. He towered, garbed in obsidian broadcloth that devoured illumination. His dermis was tawny as sun-kissed oak, his mane sable as midnight's veil, and his orbs gleamed like forged bronze, ablaze with primordial, daunting sagacity. Lord Lucien de Varenne. He remained unblinking. His scrutiny traversed from her sodden slippers to her dampened shift, alighting upon her countenance. You tarry, he intoned, his timbre a resonant basso that thrummed in her bosom. Margot dipped in reverence, her limbs quivering so she nigh toppled. My regrets, milord. The squall. Lucien stirred. He did not stride, he flowed. In a heartbeat's fraction, he loomed afore her, proximate enough for her to sense the feral warmth emanating from him. He drew breath profoundly, his nares expanding. The Beaumonts, he snarled, peering beyond into the deluge. They proffer a damsel in tatters, redolent of dread. He inclined nearer her throat, inhaling anew. Margot sealed her lids, anticipating the clamp, the agony. Yet Lucien stiffened. His bronze orbs dilated, pupils swelling till nigh eclipsing the iris. The snarl dissolved, supplanted by profound astonishment and yearning. You, he breathed, his digits ascending to graze a sodden tress from her brow. His contact sparked like embers. What essence are you? I am Margot Leclerc, milord, she faltered. I am the widow they dispatched as your chastisement. Chastisement? Lucien emitted a somber, winded chortle that chilled her marrow. Oh, the dolts, the utterly sightless dolts. He retreated, gesturing toward the interior. Enter, Margot Leclerc. You'll succumb to chill herein, and I cannot permit that. Not when I've quested 4 centuries for you. The chateau's innards defied the chill, dank Bastille Margot envisioned. Crossing the lintel, the portals thudded shut autonomously, barring the gale. Tranquility ensued, utter and profound. The ambience warmed, scented with pine resin, tallow, and a subtly musky undertone. The vestibule surpassed the Beaumont domain in splendor. A bifurcated stair ascended to a mezzanine, a prodigious sconce pendant from the arched vault. Margot lingered, dripping upon the slate tiles, forming a pool of mire and precipitation. She felt diminutive, sullied, wholly misplaced. Etienne. Lucien's command lashed the ether. Moments hence, a venerable gent in immaculate livery materialized from obscurity. He glided with poise hinting he too transcended mortal bounds, though his visage wrinkled and benign. "Milord, ready the emerald quarters," Lucien decreed, his gaze unwavering from Margot. "Prepare a soak, scalding, essences of lavender and cedar. Kindle the grate and procure raiment, damask, brocade. Incinerate these shreds she dons." Etienne arched a brow, eyeing Margot's toque shift. "The emerald quarters, milord. That sanctum unsealed since the Bourbon reign." "Execute my bidding," Lucien rumbled, a glint of verdant flaring in his bronze orbs. Etienne inclined profoundly. "Forthwith, master." He hastened away. Margot trembled, clasping herself. "Milord, I comprehend not. My kin proclaimed I was dispatched to suffice. I am a widow. I am unfit." Lucien pivoted, his gait lupin yet refined. He orbited her leisurely, akin to a guardian assessing a stray. "A widow," he ruminated. "Recount, Margot, did you cherish him? This consort of yours?" Margot recoiled. "He showed mercy when none did. But nay, 'twas no passion bond. He faltered hours post-rite." Thus untouched, Lucien murmured, halting astern. He stooped, his breath grazing her lobe. Virgin yet shadowed by demise, a scarce fusion. He positioned a palm upon her shoulder. The fervor of his grasp seared through the drenched cotton. "The Beaumonts sought to affront me. They mused, proffer the leak in the sullied ware, the omen-bearer. They aimed to deride my heritage with a dame in pauper's weeds." He circled to confront her, a digit beneath her chin elevating her visage. His orbs delved hers, fervent and probing. "Yet they erred grievously," Lucien uttered softly. "They are mortal. They perceive solely with sight. They behold drabs and woe. I discern with my essence." What do you discern?" Margot exhaled, ensnared by his gaze. "I discern a resonance," Lucien whispered. "Not mere throb, Margot. An echo. An echo. Every leakin awaits it." Lucien elucidated, his tone descending to reverent husk. "We roam epochs, sustaining on quarry that sates but sates not, mere existence. Yet once per aeon, a mortal emerges whose aura echoes to us. An aura not sustenance, but vitality, dominion, rapture." He grazed his thumb o'er her nether lip. "Your kin consigned you to perish, Margot. They deemed discarding refuse. Instead, they tendered a sapphire to a lapidary." Margot's knees buckled. She sagged, but Lucien seized her effortlessly, cradling her as if she were gossamer. "Release me," she gasped, alarm surging anew. "You'll devour me." "Devour you?" Lucien appeared affronted. He commenced bearing her up the grand stair. "I'd sooner fast another age than mar a strand upon your crown. You are invaluable, Margot. You are the harmonic. Were I to consume you, I'd forfeit the sole entity in this realm that evokes hearth." He conveyed her along a corridor adorned with tapestries of mythic hunts. He nudged ajar a dual portal at the terminus. The chamber astounded. A blaze roared in the hearth, sorcery perchance. A colossal canopy bed swathed in emerald damask commanded the space. Aside, a vaporous brass basin awaited. Lucien deposited her tenderly upon a divan nigh the blaze. He withdrew, maintaining decorous span, though his orbs darkened with restrained fervor. "Repose," he enjoined gently. "Bathe, slumber. You are secure herein, far more than amid those serpents you term kin." He veered to depart, his mantle swirling about his calves. "Milord," Margot hailed, her voice faint. He halted at the threshold, palm on the latch. Why endure the affront if you sense their mockery? Lucien glanced rearward over his shoulder, a ruthless, daunting grin arching his lips. For, my dear Margot, now possessing you, I wield the supreme armament. And come morrow, when the Beaumonts grasp what they've truly yielded, they'll beseech, and I'll savor their grovel. He exited, sealing the portal. Margot heard the latches snick, not barring her within, but a resonant ward fortifying the chamber against the cosmos. She was solitary. She was warned. And for the initial instance in 4 years, she wasn't the jinxed widow in obscurity. She was altered, perilous. Lucien whisks Margot inside, burning her tatters and adorning her in finery, explaining her rare echo that calls to his beastly soul after centuries of search. Dawn at Château Noir arrived sans radiance. The ponderous brocade drapes remained drawn, yet the sanctum illumined by the gentle luminescence of ensorcelled sconces. Margot awoke amid the vast bed, the linen satin smoother than any sheet caressed. For an instant, alarm surged, oblivion shrouding her locale till the aroma of pine and musk revived recollections. She bolted upright. Upon the bedside stand rested a salver. A silver ewer of tisane, fresh berries, warm viennoiseries, and a lone deep violet iris. Also, a missive in sharp, flowing script. Don the Verdant. Convene in the Athenaeum when prepared. L. Margot regarded the armoire. It gaped. Within, the taupe shift vanished. Instead hung a robe of profound jade taffeta, styled both contemporary and timeless. 'Twas a gown for a sovereign, not a forsaken. She uploaded swiftly, scouring the remnant forsaken sensation from her dermis. Donning the jade, it conformed impeccably, cinching her midriff and cascading to the flags like verdant cascade. She beheld the looking-glass. The pallid, terrified lass from the wagon evaporated. The jade mirrored in her cheeks. She appeared vital. She unlatched her chamber portal. The corridor void, yet she discerned faint lute strains from the manor's depths. She pursued the melody. It guided to the Athenaeum, a chamber 2 levels lofty, brimming with tomes exceeding the provincial repository. At the distal extremity, Lucien reclined at a harpsichord. He donned no mantle today, solely a linen tunic with cuffs furled, unveiling forearms akin to hewn granite. He ceased strumming as she ingress. He delayed pivoting. Verdant befits you, he remarked, his timbre resounding in the expanse. The hue of renewal. Where are the retainers? Margot queried, advancing deeper. The edifice so hushed. Lucien swiveled on the stool. In diurnal glow, or what sufficed therein, he resembled less a fiend and more a strikingly comely patrician, though the feral elegance persisted. I maintain scant retainers, solely Etienne and sundry wardens who sentinel the domain. I prize seclusion. He arose and approached. I've dealt your spouse's demise, Lucien stated nonchalantly, retrieving a dossier from a proximate lectern. Margot rigidified. Why? It signifies naught. He perished. It signifies, Lucien asserted, his orb shadowing. For the Beaumonts wielded it to stigmatize you. They dubbed you ill-omened widow. They disseminated canards that you envenomed him to claim a bequest you ne'er acquired. He cast the dossier upon the lectern. It skidded o'er the glossed timber, halting afore her. Peruse. Margot seized it. 'Twas a healer's chronicle, aged and jaundiced. What is this? The examiner's authentic account, Lucien declared, not the fabrication your Aunt Vivian bribed for Hamlet Gazette. Henri succumbed not to vital lapse, Margot. He was toxified with belladonna. Margot gasped, discarding the parchment. Toxified? But I didn't. I know you didn't, Lucien avowed vehemently, nearing. But discern who procured ample belladonna from the local herbalist 3 days pre your nuptials. Margot stared, sanguine ebbing from her visage. Nay. Vivian Beaumont, Lucien hissed. She slew him. She slew him to guarantee your widowing, disgrace, and desperation sufficient for deployment as decoy when the era arrived to settle her obligation to me. The chamber whirled. Margot clutched the lectern's rim for steadiness. She assassinated him merely to exploit me. They regard mortals as chattel, Lucien uttered with revulsion. They esteem kin as tender. They shattered you, Margot. They pilfered your repute, your liberty, your felicity. He extended, clasping her palms in his. His dermis was fervent, his hold firm, anchoring her. Yet they committed a lethal blunder, Lucien proclaimed, his tone descending to a snarl. They consigned the testament of their felony to the sole entity on terra who can scent mendacity. What course? Margot breathed, elevating her gaze to his bronze orbs. She realized with a startle that dread eluded her. She was incensed. A glacial, resolute ire burgeoned in her bosom, supplanting terror. Lucien grinned, and this juncture, 'twas not ruthless. 'Twas collusive. 'Twas the grin of a monarch proffering a glaive to a paladin. This eve is the solstice rite, Lucien declared. A convocation of exalted lineages, the lichens and mortal magnates who minister us. Your aunt and kin will attend. They anticipate your demise or degradation, serving libations as thrall with yoke round throat. He elevated her palm, imprinting a salute upon her knuckles. Instead, Lucien intoned, his orbs aflame, I'll ingress with you upon my limb, arrayed in jade, donning the Varenne ancestral gems, and will evince that the dame they discarded has ascended the dame of the peaks. Margot beheld the werewolf sovereign. She recalled Vivian's sneer. She recalled Celeste's mirth. She recalled poor Henri, slain for machination. Margot reciprocated Lucien's clasp. I possess no adornments, she murmured. Lucien's smirk broadened, unveiling the points of his canines. My dear, beneath this pavement lies a crypt that would render the Duke of Orleans lament. Let us embellish. The crypt beneath Château Noir stretched farther than Margot had imagined, a labyrinth of vaults carved into living stone, accessible only through a hidden stair behind the hearth of the ancient Athenaeum. Lucien's hand, firm but measured, guided her down the spiral steps, torchlight flickering across walls etched with the passage of centuries. Shadows danced like restless spirits, their forms twisting and bowing as though the stones themselves were alive. The air grew cooler with each descent, carrying the scent of aged earth, polished metal, and something darker, an underlying tang of wildness that prickled her senses and made her pulse tighten. Margot's fingers curled around her shift, the rough cloth failing to shield her from the growing exhilaration and fear, a shiver running along her spine. This hoard, Lucien said, his voice low but resonant, echoing across the vaults, has been amassed over generations. Gems of fallen empires, treasures claimed from hunts long forgotten, objects imbued with the memory of power and blood. They arrived at a chamber that seemed impossibly vast, lined with iron chests and glass cases that glimmered under the torch's wavering flame. Margot's breath caught at the sight, emeralds deep as forest pools, rubies scarlet as freshly spilled blood, diamonds that captured and fractured light into shards of fire. Every piece seemed to pulse with history, a weight of lives and ambitions suspended in crystal and gold. Lucien unlocked a chest with a key dangling from a chain at his waist. The lock clicked with a metallic echo, a note of finality that reverberated in the enclosed space. From the chest, he retrieved a necklace, a delicate weave of silver vines threaded with peridots that caught the torchlight, scattering it in soft green sparks. He stepped close and clasped it around Margot's neck. The cold metal grazed her skin, a sensation at once foreign and intimate. The Varenne sigil, he murmured, his fingers lingering at the nape of her neck, brushing the loose strands of her dark hair. It marks you as mine, a ward against foes and shadows alike. Margot touched the cool stones with tentative reverence, feeling the weight not only physically but spiritually, as if the necklace carried the essence of power she had not yet known she possessed. Why me, truly, she whispered. What is this, echo you speak of? Lucien's bronze eyes glimmered in the torchlight, reflecting both the flame and an intensity that made her chest tighten. Lichens are cursed with duality, man and beast in eternal strife. We endure, but the wildness gnaws at our minds, eroding sanity over centuries. Legends tell of rare souls whose presence harmonizes the chaos, an echo that calms the inner storm, amplifying strength without stripping away the self. You are such a soul. He stepped closer, the heat of his presence brushing against her skin, the air between them thick with an unspoken current. When I sensed you in the rain, it was not bloodlust. It was recognition. Your aura resonates with my curse. You soothe the beast within me, like a lullaby to a raging sea. Margot felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but of dawning comprehension and power. She could feel the echo he spoke of, a resonance between their essences, subtle yet undeniable, tightening like a cord between them. Her gaze darted to the torchlit walls, wary of the centuries-old stones surrounding them, yet finding in Lucien's eyes a gravity she could not deny. "And my kin?" she asked softly. They knew nothing of this resonance, this echo. Lucien laughed, a deep sound that rolled like thunder across the stone vaults, carrying a shadow of dark amusement. They see only a monster to placate. They do not perceive the depth, the necessity of what I require. But with you, his eyes bore into hers, compelling her attention, I do not see a bride to command, but an equal. Together, Margot, we can unravel the web they wove around your life, the poisonings, the schemes, the betrayals that left you a widow before your time. Margot's pulse quickened, the flicker of torchlight illuminating her features as awe mingled with a sense of justice she had long craved. For years, her life had been a series of shadows, betrayals, and forced humility. Now, the same family that had scorned her would find themselves powerless before her newfound alignment with Lucien. "You intend to use me," she said, voice trembling with both fear and a strange thrill, "as a weapon?" "Not as a weapon," Lucien corrected, his tone both solemn and unwavering, "as a partner. Your echo is not a tool to be wielded recklessly, but a force that can heal as much as it can destroy. The choice, the strength, will always be yours." She drew a trembling breath, the weight of centuries pressing upon her in that crypt, yet the promise of empowerment uncoiling within her veins. The necklace, the echo, and the man standing before her, all converged into a reality she could scarcely have imagined, no longer a forsaken widow, but an indispensable presence beside the sovereign of shadows, her destiny intertwined with his in ways both terrifying and exhilarating. Lucien guided her further into the chamber, past relics of wars long dead, through rows of caskets containing ancestral arms and ceremonial garb. Each artifact told stories of ambition, conquest, and failure, each reminded Margot that power was never gentle, never forgiving. Yet, unlike the relics, she had choice. She had voice. She had partnership, and in partnership, strength. "We begin with small victories," Lucien murmured, eyes locked onto hers. "A thread here, a whisper there. They will not anticipate us, they will not see what we are capable of until it is already too late. I have waited centuries for this, Margot, and it has led me to you." Margot's heart thumped in resonance with his words, with the pulse of the crypt, with the silent acknowledgement that her life had shifted from victimhood to agency. The gown of linen and tattered reputation she had worn moments before felt like a discarded skin compared to the armor of purpose settling over her soul. She straightened, shoulders squared, eyes aflame with determination. Lucien's hand, brushing against hers briefly as he passed her a small, intricately carved dagger, its hilt marked with the sigil of Château Noir, cemented their alliance. "They will not see it coming," he said softly. "But we will. And when they stumble, it will be by our design." Margot nodded, every nerve alight with anticipation. No longer forsaken. No longer pawn. The shadows that had haunted her birthright were now hers to command alongside Lucien. In the torch's flickering glow, she felt it, the first stirrings of unshakable resolve. The chamber, the jewels, the darkness, all converged into one truth: she was no longer Margot Leclerc, abandoned and scorned. She was Margot Varenne, echo of the beast, harbinger of reckoning, and partner to a sovereign of shadows. As they ascended the spiral steps, the weight of the crypt receding behind them, Margot exhaled, the cool night air washing over her. Rain had begun to fall once more over Château Noir, but she did not tremble. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, and for the first time, she felt in control of both. The archives of Château Noir were a fortress unto themselves, a labyrinthine wing perched high in the manor, where time had left its residue on every shelf and surface. Dust hung in the air, thick as incense, drifting over ledgers bound in cracked leather and parchment sealed with forgotten sigils. The lantern Lucien carried cast a wavering glow, sending the shadows of countless tomes crawling along the walls like restless sentinels. Each step on the worn oak floorboards echoed in the silence, a rhythmic herald of the truths buried within these walls. Margot followed, the peridot necklace resting cold against her chest, a constant reminder of her newfound purpose. "Here lies the truth they sought to bury," Lucien murmured, his voice low, carrying the weight of centuries. He moved to a locked cabinet, the keys dangling from a chain at his waist. With a practiced flick, he opened it, revealing a trove of bound volumes and sealed documents, each exuding the aroma of age, ink, and secrets. He selected one, its leather brittle yet strong, etched with the family crest, a twisted vine surrounding a wolf's head. "This," he said, laying it before her on the oaken desk, "chronicles the deeds of your kin, the bargains struck in shadows, and the betrayals concealed beneath veneer and velvet." Margot sank into the chair, her fingers tightening around the edge as the truth began to seep into her bones. The papers Lucien spread before her were meticulous, apothecary receipts, witness statements, and a concealed coroner's seal, all aligned in a sequence that left no doubt. The ledger entries chronicled precise dates, cryptic notations, and the unbroken trail of a poison, belladonna, that had claimed her betrothed, Henri, on the eve of their wedding. Each word she read seemed to carve into her chest, a cruel reminder of the deception that had orchestrated her suffering. "They thought your grief would cripple you," Lucien said, stepping closer, the torchlight glinting against the bronze of his eyes. "They expected despair to chain your spirit. But they underestimated the strength of what walks here." He gestured to her chest, where her heartbeat flared beneath the necklace, "and the echo that binds us." Margot's lips parted, a whisper escaping, "Henri, my Henri, and all this, for me to be ruined?" The bile rose, burning in her throat. She felt the years of whispered rumors, the scornful glances, and the secreted accusations fall upon her now as evidence of malice, not misfortune. Her hands shook, but not with fear. Anger flared, white-hot, igniting a resolve that had slumbered beneath grief. Lucien's gaze never wavered, steady and commanding. "Your deathly widowhood was orchestrated. Your so-called curse, whispered across halls and villages, was a lie constructed to make you expendable. Vivian and her conspirators needed a pawn, and you fit perfectly." He laid a parchment across the ledger, revealing the apothecary receipt. "Days before your vows, Vivian purchased the belladonna under a false name. Henri's wine was laced, the cause of death recorded under the guise of misfortune, of weakness. The man who promised to love you was extinguished not by fate, but by their hand." Margot traced the ink with trembling fingers, fury coiling like a living thing in her gut. Her amber eyes, sharp and watchful even in the dim glow, narrowed with a clarity born of rage and betrayal. "To what end?" she asked, voice low, brittle as frost. "To disgrace me. To leave me, worthless." "Not merely to disgrace," Lucien answered, his voice a growl echoing softly against stone walls. "To control. To manipulate. Your widowhood, your whispered curse, your solitude, all designed to make you malleable. They shaped you into an offering for the pact, ensuring that Celeste would take precedence. You were the convenient pawn, the rightful heir to your own misery discarded." A shiver of revulsion and exhilaration coursed through Margot. Every slur she had endured, every insult whispered behind veils of propriety, every glance of pity or scorn, now crystallized into evidence of treachery. The rage that had simmered for years surged into action, fanning her into a force she had scarcely recognized within herself. Her chestnut hair fell into her face as she leaned forward, her hand brushing across the ledger, across the proof of her family's betrayal. "No more," she murmured, almost to herself. "No longer victim. No longer pawn." Lucien observed her transformation with quiet approval, the torchlight catching the edge of his sharp features. He stepped closer, placing a hand atop hers, steadying but not restraining. "Your echo is no longer passive," he said softly. "It resonates with purpose now. Together, we can dismantle the web they wove, undo the misdeeds, reclaim the agency they stole from you." The peridot necklace around her neck seemed to thrum in resonance with her heartbeat, a talisman and a signal of alignment. Margot could feel it, her power, her essence, responding to the promise Lucien laid before her. No longer forsaken, she now stood as partner, as equal, as the catalyst of reckoning. Hours passed as they pored over ledgers and letters, uncovering the intricate tapestry of deception that had shaped her past. Margot absorbed each detail, the falsified receipts, the veiled threats, the careful orchestration of her ostracization, until the enormity of their actions was laid bare. Yet with every revelation, a clarity emerged. She was no longer helpless. She was armed, not merely with knowledge, but with the echo that harmonized with Lucien's beast. Lucien closed the final ledger and turned to her, the torchlight framing his expression in flickering gold and shadow. "You have the proof. You have the right. And now, the means. Do you understand what this allows?" Margot lifted her chin, amber eyes blazing. "I understand," she said, voice steady, though her pulse still hammered in her throat. "They will not see it coming. And when they stumble, it will be by our design." Lucien inclined his head, the corner of his mouth lifting in the faintest smirk. "Good. Then let this crypt, these tomes, and this night mark the beginning of their reckoning. Your echo, your strength, and my curse together, no deceit they have woven will withstand us." The chamber felt smaller now, intimate and potent, alive with possibility. Margot breathed in the scent of parchment and stone, feeling the weight of generations pressing down, yet simultaneously lending her energy. She was no longer the widow scorned, the forsaken Margot Leclerc of the wagon-bound path. She was Margot Varenne, herald of justice, ally to the sovereign of shadows, and arbiter of the vengeance long denied her. As they left the archives, the lantern casting long, flickering shadows along the vaulted corridor, Margot's heartbeat steadied, synchronized with purpose. The past had been laid bare, and now the future, dark, perilous, and infinitely intoxicating, was hers to shape. Château Noir no longer held her captive, it was the anvil upon which she would forge her destiny. As dusk cloaked Château Noir in shadows, Lucien moved through the halls with deliberate purpose, summoning artisans from the hidden recesses of the manor. They emerged like wraiths, draped in black, silent as the night, measuring Margot with meticulous precision. The torchlight reflected in their sharp tools, illuminating folds of fabric they carried, yet they spoke no word, as if the chamber itself demanded discretion. Margot remained seated on the edge of the chaise longue, amber eyes wide, pulse quickening with the anticipation of transformation. Each measure, each subtle adjustment, felt like a ritual, preparing her not just in appearance, but for the trials that lay ahead. From the stacks of emerald silk, the tailors drew the fabric with reverent care, letting it cascade over Margot's frame like a verdant waterfall. The material shimmered, reflecting a muted forest glow under the candlelight, as if the very essence of the woods had been stitched into the threads. Lucien guided the folding and draping with exacting precision, his hands confident, authoritative, yet careful as if the gown were both shield and weapon. "This is no mere dress," he intoned, fastening a wolf-pelt cloak around her shoulders. The garment smelled faintly of the wilderness, a scent that whispered power and danger. "This is armor for the right to come." Margot's fingers brushed the silk, tracing the intricate embroidery that traced the hem, cuffs, and bodice. Each pattern carried symbolism, interwoven vines, hidden sigils, crescents and stars, ancient markers of Lycan heritage and warding. She felt the weight of centuries press upon her shoulders, yet also the thrill of agency. Her reflection in the mirror showed more than beauty, it reflected authority and resolve, a woman forged anew from betrayal, fire, and purpose. Lucien approached with care, selecting heirlooms from a velvet-lined chest. A moonstone ring, glowing with ethereal light, settled upon her finger. Earrings of jade, carved in the shape of entwined wolves, dangled against her neck. Each piece thrummed faintly with the pulse of his own Lycan essence, a connection both tangible and mystical. "These are not mere ornaments," he said, his bronze eyes darkening with intensity. "Each carries the power of protection, perception, and influence. Wear them with intent, and let them guide your focus." Margot felt the resonance immediately, a subtle hum in her chest, a tether linking her will to Lucien's power. Her heartbeat quickened, not in fear, but in recognition. She was no longer passive. Every ounce of betrayal, of scorn, of whispered rumor and falsehood, now lay in her hands as leverage. The necklace around her throat, the rings, the silks, they were more than symbols, they were instruments of reclaiming her narrative. The two moved then to the planning, their minds intertwining like the threads of her gown. They sat in the candlelit library, the room smelling faintly of parchment, wax, and the lingering musk of wolfskin. Margot spread a map of the Beaumont estate across the table, tracing the halls, the guard posts, and the secret passages she had explored in her youth. Lucien listened, interrupting only to offer insight from centuries of observation, his knowledge of human, and Lycan, behavior sharpening every angle. "We exposed the poison at the assembly," Lucien said, voice low, measured. "The right moment, when they are distracted by ceremony and pride. One accusation, one revelation, and the web begins to unravel." Margot leaned in, amber eyes glowing with determination. "We must ensure the witnesses are secured. Vivian trusts no one outside her circle, but she underestimates me. I know the servants, the hidden paths, the weak points of her confidence. We can manipulate the whispers before she realizes what's occurring." Their strategy session deepened through the night, candle flames casting shifting shadows across the walls. Lucien's voice alternated between mentor and partner, drawing Margot further into the fold of power she had not yet realized she could wield. Each piece of intel she provided, each subtle nuance about her kin's vanities and insecurities, strengthened their plan. Her past, which had felt like a prison of ridicule and loss, became a weapon. Each slight, every manipulated glance and carefully whispered accusation she had endured, now fed into a blueprint of justice. Lucien studied her as she spoke, bronze eyes softened by admiration. "You are more than your lineage, Margot," he said quietly, almost to himself. "You are the balance, the echo that tempers the beast. Together, we are beyond what they can imagine." Margot's lips curved, not in joy, but in a grim satisfaction. The fear and humiliation she had carried like a shroud were stripped away. In its place arose cunning, awareness, and a pulse quickened by anticipation. She realized the bond between her and Lucien had shifted from necessity to partnership, a partnership tempered in shadows, forged in strategy, and empowered by mutual recognition. By the time the final garments and adornments were in place, Margot rose, silk rustling with authority. The wolf pelt cloak draped elegantly, the heirlooms glimmered faintly with magic, and her gaze met Lucien's in the mirror. They were aligned now, two forces bound by purpose, poised to strike with precision and calculated force. Lucien stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as he adjusted the moonstone ring. "We move at first light," he said. "The assembly will never see us coming. Your voice, your presence, your echo, it will be the dagger they do not anticipate." Margot nodded, feeling the surge of power pulse through every limb. "I understand," she replied. "We do this together, and we leave nothing unturned. They will regret the day they scorned the widow." In that chamber of silk, jewels, and whispered plotting, Margot transformed fully. No longer a pawn, no longer a victim of circumstance, she embodied authority, elegance, and lethal intention. Lucien had provided guidance and power, but she had claimed her own strength, her cunning, her courage, her mastery over the shadows that had once oppressed her. As they left her chambers, the manor's corridors stretched before them, silent witnesses to the forging of a new alliance. Candlelight glinted off the emerald silks, the jade earrings, the moonstone ring, symbols of power, of partnership, of the reckoning to come. Margot's footsteps were firm, her gaze unflinching, and at her side Lucien moved with his own predatory grace. Together, they were no longer simply survivors of betrayal, they were the architects of vengeance, the heralds of Château Noir's silent storm. The midnight air was thick with mist, curling around the ancient oaks that ringed Aubert's Lune, and carrying the scent of damp earth and flickering torches. The clearing had been transformed into a stage of awe and intimidation, marble plinths supporting obsidian bowls of flickering flame, garlands of nocturnal blooms, and a low hum of music mingling with the rustle of silk and whispers of anticipation. Nobility, both mortal and lichen, gathered in carefully arranged tiers, their faces alight with candle glow, masking curiosity with polite smiles, while beneath, unease festered. The solstice rite, held once a generation, was meant to affirm power, unity, and bloodlines, but tonight it would unveil truths long buried. Vivian and Celeste lingered near the upper terrace, sipping golden nectar from crystalline goblets. Vivian's eyes darted to the shadows of the tree-line, scanning for any sign that Margot had faltered, that the widow had been discarded or destroyed as they had intended. Celeste, fingers tightening around the stem of her glass, whispered of relief, assuming her cousin's fate sealed, her own rise to prominence assured. Their smirks, fragile as gossamer, would soon shatter. A sudden hush fell over the assembly as the massive double doors at the far end of the glen creaked open. The torches along the perimeter wavered, shadows flinging themselves across the ground like restless spirits. A herald stepped forward, staff raised, and boomed across the clearing. Lord Lucien de Varenne, Alpha of the Peaks, and his consort, Dame Margot de Varenne. The words sliced through the murmur of conversation like a sharpened blade. Gasps erupted, rippling through the gathering. Noblemen stiffened, their hands brushing hidden daggers or cradling wine goblets, while lichens shifted, ears pricked, eyes narrowing with both curiosity and deference. All attention turned to the entrance as Margot emerged, poised and luminous, stepping into the torchlight on Lucien's arm. Her emerald gown flowed like a river of forest flame, hem brushing the dew-laden grass, embroidered with threads that caught the firelight in scintillating glints. The fabric clung to her form, asserting elegance and authority, while the wolf-pelt cloak over her shoulders whispered of ferocity beneath refinement. Her peridot necklace and jade earrings reflected every torch flicker, subtle yet commanding, each gem a testament to power she had never wielded openly before. Margot's eyes, amber and piercing, scanned the assembly with the calm assurance of one who had claimed her place in the world. Each breath she took seemed measured, purposeful, and the faintest quiver in her fingers betrayed neither fear nor hesitation. It was the tremor of anticipation, of the culmination of years spent in subjugation, betrayal, and preparation. She was no longer the discarded widow in drab linens. She was the orchestrator of consequence, the equal of the sovereign at her side. Lucien's presence beside her added to the spectacle. Cloaked in black velvet and embroidered wolf motifs, his stature and predatory elegance commanded attention. Bronze eyes glinted in torchlight, scanning the faces of those who had underestimated him, and her. Each subtle gesture, the tilt of his head, the steady placement of his hand lightly at Margot's back, spoke volumes of ownership, protection, and shared purpose. He had not come merely to escort a consort, he had come to present an equal, a partner in dominion. The nobles murmured, some bowing instinctively, others stiff with unease. Among the crowd, Vivian's alabaster face drained of color, lips parting in disbelief. She grasped her pearl necklace as if to steady herself, the delicate chain biting into her palm. Celeste's grip on her glass tightened until the crystal threatened to crack. The young heiress, once so smug and self-assured, paled before the vision of Margot, a woman they had dismissed as expendable, now luminous, formidable, untouchable. Margot's gaze landed on her relatives, amber eyes unflinching. Every whispered slight, every hidden malice, every poisoned whine and scorned glance was catalogued in her mind. The years of humiliation and exile had forged patience and precision. Now, she stood as both revelation and reckoning, her presence a silent accusation that could not be ignored. Lucien's voice, smooth and low, drifted across the clearing, carrying the weight of authority. "My consort is no mere adornment," he declared. "She is my equal, the echo that tempers my curse, and the power to protect what is ours by right." His words, though spoken softly, struck through the whispers of the assembly, carrying more force than any blade. Heads turned, jaws tightened, and some faltered under the combined weight of truth and awe. The torchlight flickered across Margot's face as she inhaled deeply, lifting her chin. She moved with deliberate grace, descending the central aisle, her steps measured yet confident, each sway of the gown a declaration of sovereignty. Eyes followed her, drawn to the subtle power she exuded, and whispers surged into a tide of disbelief and wonder. What had been hidden, her intelligence, her cunning, her latent resonance with the Leakin legacy, was now undeniable. Vivian's voice caught in her throat, a tremor of disbelief escaping. "Impossible," she whispered, half to herself, half in the futile hope of denial. Celeste's knees threatened to buckle, and she pressed a trembling hand against her chest as though it might stave off the shock. Their schemes, their calculated cruelty, had been undone by a widow they had dismissed as cursed. Lucien guided Margot to the dais at the center, and together they faced the assembly. "This night is for truth," he intoned, eyes sweeping over the nobles. "And let it be known, Margot de Varenne stands not in fear, but in command. Those who sought to diminish her will see their plots unravel." The assembled guests were frozen between awe and terror. Nobles whispered, lichens growled softly, and Margot felt the collective weight of their gazes settle upon her, not as a victim, not as a pawn, but as a force that had risen from ashes and shadows. She had been cast aside, mocked, and nearly destroyed. Now, adorned in emerald, backed by the Alpha whose curse and power intertwined with her own, she was unassailable. The orchestra of the forest seemed to pause, the wind stilled, and even the flames of the torches bowed to her presence. Lucien's hand at her back was both anchor and declaration. Together, they were not merely survivors, they were rulers of consequence. Their alliance radiated potency, elegance, and an undeniable threat to those who had schemed against her. Vivian's lips parted again, voiceless, as comprehension struck. Celeste's eyes darted wildly, seeking an escape that did not exist. Margot, her gaze unwavering, allowed a small, controlled smile, a gesture of both triumph and silent warning. The woman who had been forsaken, discarded, and scorned had risen, no longer bound by fear, a queen in her own right beside the sovereign of shadows. As they stood arm in arm, torchlight reflecting on her emerald silks and Lucien's midnight robes, Margot felt the culmination of years of preparation, strategy, and endurance coalesce in this single, breathtaking moment. Tonight, the abandoned widow was no longer invisible. She was the echo, the reckoning, the unyielding force against treachery and deceit. And every gaze upon her, the nobility, the lichens, and most of all her kin, bore witness to the undeniable truth: Margot had arrived, radiant, resolute, and unstoppable. The torchlight trembled across Aubaird's Lune's Glen, flickering against stone pedestals and the gathered crowd, casting long, quivering shadows that danced like restless spirits. The assembly, lichens of noble blood, mortals bound to tradition, and observers of ancient rites, stood in uneasy silence, sensing the electric shift in the air. Margot's emerald gown shimmered like fire against the mist, the peridot necklace catching every flicker of light as if it bore the judgment of centuries past. Her pulse was steady, measured, each step deliberate as she circled the ceremonial space on Lucien's arm. Vivian, the architect of Margot's disgrace, forced a smile, her lips tight and brittle. "Margot? Alive?" she murmured, voice laced with faux delight, eyes flicking nervously to the Alpha beside her. Her breath caught as the woman she had deemed cursed and expendable strode with unwavering purpose into the center of the clearing. Margot's gaze, amber and unflinching, met hers, and a smile curled across her lips, cold, precise, and lethal in its clarity. "Alive, and enlightened," she declared, voice carrying across the glen like a blade through fog. Whispers rippled through the crowd, the nobles shifted, unsure whether to gawk or flee, while the lycan's ears pricked, muscles tensing in instinctive alert. Lucien stepped closer, his presence a shadow of authority beside hers, bronze eyes gleaming with restrained power. From his coat, he produced the bound ledgers, parchment scrolls, and sealed parchments he had painstakingly gathered. He laid them before Margot on an elevated stone pedestal, his hand brushing the edge as if bestowing a weapon. "Every act, every poison, every falsehood, they intended to conceal it all," he murmured. "Tonight, the truth is ours to wield." Margot extended a hand and gathered the first parchment, unfolding it with deliberate ceremony. The crowd leaned in, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," Margot began, her voice steady, resonant, every syllable carrying authority she had never been allowed before. "What you are about to witness is the deception hidden behind our family's smiles, the duplicity cloaked in propriety, and the malice long tolerated for the sake of power." Vivian's lips parted in shock, her pearl necklace shaking with her trembling fingers. What are you?" Margot ignored her, lifting a ledger filled with coroner's seals, apothecary receipts, and witness notations, each line and signature a scar of betrayal. "This proves the death of my late betrothed, Henri, was orchestrated, not fate, not misfortune." She let the words hang, dripping with precision, letting the murmur swell. "Belladonna, administered under a false name. Purchased days before our nuptials. Vivian Beaumont, it was you who ensured my widowhood, who manufactured my disgrace, who sought to pave the way for Celeste." A hush fell over the assembly. Lycans growled softly, the low vibration of their throats vibrating through the earth, muscles coiling as instinct and centuries of hunting sharpened their awareness. Mortals stiffened, hands brushing at concealed daggers, but fear and all muted movement. All eyes, human and beast, turned to Vivian. Vivian's mask slipped, her alabaster face paled, eyes darting to the documents as if they might vanish if she ignored them. Her voice faltered. "Lies, all lies. You dare." Margot lifted another parchment, this one a sealed statement from a trusted witness, the scribe who had chronicled the wine served at her wedding. "A witness saw you pour the poison, not into any vessel of Celeste, but into Henry's chalice. Every transaction, every false signature, every whispered rumor about my curse, all of it leads back to you." A murmur ran through the crowd, some audibly shocked, others leaning closer, sensing the shifting balance of power. Lycans in the outer ring of the assembly bristled, tails flicked, claws flexed, ears swiveling toward the scent of deceit and malice now revealed. Whispers became chatter, chatter became tension so thick it could be cut with a blade. Celeste clutched at her azure muslin gown, a tremor running through her body as realization dawned. "Margot, you." Margot's eyes met hers, amber fire igniting with both authority and restraint. "I am no longer the widow you cast aside, the cursed shadow to be used and discarded. I stand here with Lucien, my echo, my equal, and together we will see justice rendered." Lucien's presence beside her reinforced the assertion, a silent predator radiating lethal calm. His eyes swept over the assembly, taking in faces of nobles, lycans, and family alike. Each knew the consequences of challenging him, his power was immense, centuries honed, and now it was aligned with Margot's resolve. He inclined his head toward her, a gesture of partnership and unspoken promise. Her vengeance would be precise, unflinching, inevitable. Margot lifted the final document, the one containing witness testimony from the apothecary who had sold the poison. The parchment bore ink smudges, the faint scent of herbs still clinging, proof tangible and undeniable. "These are the chains they sought to bind me with, forged in deceit, nourished in silence," she said, voice ringing like a bell over stone and fog. "And tonight, those chains are broken. The court erupted in whispers and murmurs. Lichens flexed, jaws snapping in low warning, while mortals stumbled back, startled by the sheer force of Margot's presence. Vivian's hands shook, clutching the folds of her gown as if to anchor herself. Celeste's lips parted, her previous confidence dissolved in disbelief and fear. Their plots had unraveled before the eyes of both human and supernatural peers. The widow they had scorned had returned, radiant and unyielding. Margot's gaze swept across the assembly one last time, amber fire blazing. She spoke the words that carried her transformation from victim to arbiter. You thought me weak. You thought me cursed. But it was never I who was powerless. Tonight, every lie you told, every hand you raised against me, every secret you kept, it is revealed, and your treachery stands naked before all. Lucien's hand brushed her back, a subtle affirmation, their alliance visible to all. Together, they were unstoppable, a union of fury, power, and cunning. In the flickering torchlight, Margot felt the surge of vindication, the weight of centuries of injustice lifting as the assembly absorbed the truth. No longer abandoned, no longer discarded, she had claimed her power and her voice, and those who had wronged her would never forget it. Vivian's lips parted, voiceless, as the enormity of the exposure crushed her composure. Celeste's eyes darted for an escape that did not exist, her schemes unraveled before both mortals and lichens. Margot, unflinching, allowed a small, measured smile to curl her lips, not of glee, but of quiet triumph. She was no longer a pawn, no longer a shadow. She was a force of reckoning, and her kin would witness the price of underestimating her. And as the last torch flickered and shadows lengthened, Margot felt the first true thrill of power coursing through her, a harmony of justice, vengeance, and mastery that she had been denied for too long. The widow discarded, the heiress scorned, the ghost of betrayal, Margot was reborn, and the court of Aubaird's loon would never see her the same way again. Lucien declares Margot his eternal consort, unleashing controlled fury on her oppressors, cementing their union in blood and passion. The solstice rite at Aubaird's loon had transformed from celebration to tribunal. Torches cast flickering shadows across the ancient oaks, their flames dancing like restless spirits witnessing judgment. The assembled, lichens of noble pacts and mortal magnates who navigated their world with careful deference, formed a circle around the central clearing. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Lucien and Margot stood at its heart, her hand still resting on his arm, the emerald gown catching firelight like living leaves. Vivian Beaumont recovered first from her shock, forcing a brittle smile as she approached through the parting throng. Margot, my dear niece. Alive and radiant. We feared the worst when the storm took the carriage. Her voice dripped false sweetness, but her eyes darted nervously to Lucien, calculating escape. Celeste hovered behind her mother, face pale beneath rouge, clutching her azure skirts as if they might shield her from the gathering storm. Margot met Vivian's gaze without flinching, the peridot necklace at her throat gleaming like a ward. Feared the worst. Or hoped for it, Aunt. Her voice carried clear across the clearing, steady where once it would have trembled. Lucien's grip on her arm tightened, not possession, but anchor. His bronze eyes swept the assembly, commanding silence. The Lady Margot speaks truth, he rumbled, the words vibrating through the ground itself. The Beaumonts fulfilled an ancient blood pact not with honor, but with deceit. They sent not a willing bride of pure intent, but a woman they had broken, widowed by their own hand, disgraced by their lies, dressed in rags to mock the bond. Gasps rose. A Lichen elder from the Eastern Pact stepped forward, silver-furred even in human form. Proof, Alpha. Lucien nodded to Etienne, who emerged from the shadows bearing the dossier. Parchments passed among the council, apothecary records, the true coroner's seal, witness statements bought and suppressed. Vivian's composure cracked as the evidence circulated, her face draining of color. You cannot trust the word of a beast over gentlefolk, she cried, voice shrill. This is slander. Margot stepped forward, pulling free of Lucien's arm though his eyes tracked her protectively. Gentlefolk? She laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. You poisoned Henri because he threatened your control. A kind man who offered me shelter when you would have left me destitute. You murdered him to craft your cursed widow, a perfect sacrifice when the pact came due. The assembly's mood shifted palpably. Mortal allies of the Beaumonts edged away, lichens growled low in their throats. Celeste whimpered, clutching her mother's sleeve. Vivian tried one last gambit, turning to the crowd with theatrical tears. She was always unstable, jealous of Celeste's prospects. This is revenge for... Enough. Lucien's voice cut through like a blade. The air thickened, pressure building as his form began to shift, not fully, but enough. Claws extended, shoulders broadened, eyes flashing verdant as his beast rose in controlled fury. The nearest torches flared higher, flames bending toward him as if in obeisance. He moved faster than mortal eyes could track, appearing before Vivian in a blur. One clawed hand closed around her throat, not crushing, but lifting her until her feet dangled. You dared poison a human under my protection, he snarled, fangs elongating. You dared send my destined mate to me in chains of your making, thinking to insult what you cannot comprehend. Vivian choked, clawing at his wrist to no avail. Celeste screamed, collapsing to her knees. Margot placed a hand on Lucien's arm. The contact was light, but immediate, the growl in his throat quieted, claws retracting slightly. Her echo, working even here, in fury's height. Not like this, she said softly, though her own eyes burned. Let the council judge. Let them see justice, not vengeance. Lucien's gaze met hers, the beast receding at her touch. Slowly, he lowered Vivian, who collapsed gasping. As my lady bids, he declared to the assembly, voice still edged with steel. But know this, Margot Leclerc is no longer forsaken. She is Margot de Varenne, my eternal consort, bearer of the echo that binds my curse and crowns my strength. He turned to the council elders. The Beaumont debt is paid, in blood and truth. Their holdings revert to pact stewardship. Their names stricken from alliance rolls. The judgment was swift. Guards, both Lecan and mortal enforcers, moved to restrain Vivian and Celeste. No death this night, but exile and ruin, a fate slower and more fitting. As the Beaumonts were led away, Vivian's final glare at Margot held pure hatred. Margot returned it with steady amber eyes, no longer the broken girl in taupe rags. Lucien pulled her close as the crowd dispersed, his forehead resting against hers beneath the solstice moon. You tamed the beast tonight, he murmured, voice rough with emotion. No, Margot whispered back, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I freed him to choose mercy. And he chose me. Their kiss beneath the ancient oaks was no gentle thing, fierce, claiming, centuries of loneliness meeting years of quiet suffering. When they parted, the bond between them thrummed like a living vine, her echo weaving through his curse until man and beast stood united. The assembly watched in awed silence. The discarded bride had become the Alpha's heart. With justice served, Margot rules alongside Lucien, her curse revealed as a gift, blooming into a legacy of fierce, transformative love. Seasons turned at Château Noir, the Provençal hills cycling through harvest gold to winter silver and back to verdant spring. The Beaumont name faded from local tongues, holdings absorbed into pack lands, Vivian and Celeste vanished into obscure exile, their schemes reduced to cautionary whispers around hearth fires. Margot de Varenne, once Leclerc, once forsaken, stood on the chateau's highest balcony one autumn evening, watching the sun bleed crimson across the vineyards. The emerald gown had become one of many, her wardrobe now rivaled any duchess, though she favored simpler styles that let her move freely through the estates. The peridot necklace remained constant, a visible claim and quiet reminder. Lucien approached from behind, arms sliding around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. His presence no longer startled her, she felt him coming now, the way one senses approaching thunder or spring rain. The council elders send word from the eastern pacts, he murmured against her hair. They request your presence at the next gathering. Word of the echo spreads. Margot smiled, leaning back into his warmth. They want to see if the stories are true, that a human woman tames the untamable alpha. They want to see the woman who brought justice without bloodshed, he corrected gently. Who turned my rage into judgment? Who made me better? The transformation had been gradual but profound. With Margot's echo soothing his inner beast, Lucien's shifts became choices rather than compulsions. The wildness remained, honed now into protectiveness rather than destruction. Pact disputes that once ended in challenges now found resolution through her insight, her ability to read truth in voices and faces honed by years of surviving deceit. Below them, the estate bustled with new life. Former Beaumont tenants worked the lands with fair wages and genuine loyalty, their children educated alongside Pact Young in a school Margot had established in the old chapel. The curse that once branded her dangerous had become legend retold differently, the woman whose presence brought harmony to monsters. One evening in their private chambers, fire crackling low, Lucien knelt before her, alpha to consort, beast to mate. I waited centuries for you, he said, voice rough with emotion. Thinking completion meant power. But you taught me it means peace. Margot cupped his face, thumbs tracing the strong lines now softened by happiness. And you taught me strength isn't surviving alone, it's choosing who stands beside you. Their love was no fairy tale idyll. It bore scars, nights when old nightmares woke her, when his beast stirred at threats to their territory. But each challenge forged them closer, her echo weaving deeper into his curse until the boundary between woman and wolf, mortal and immortal, blurred into something new. Years later, when their children, born with amber-flecked eyes and the gift of controlled shift, ran wild through the hills under dual moons, the story of the forsaken bride became pack lore. Not a tale of sacrifice, but of triumph, how the woman sent in rags became the heart of the wilds, how her curse revealed as blessing bound the greatest alpha in centuries. And in quiet moments, when the vineyard leaves rustled like whispered secrets, Margot would stand with Lucien watching the horizon, knowing the greatest vengeance was not ruin, but living fiercely, loving deeply, and building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. The vines of vengeance had borne unexpected fruit, a legacy of fierce, transformative love that would endure long after the Beaumont name faded to dust.